It's interesting because I would say, and you know what, Grace doesn't love it either.
Good. I'm glad.
Grace is
Let
up
them
here to
know,
share
Grace.
her
Talk your
thoughts. Let
talk.
them know. Stand on business, Grace. Well, what I was going to say is that there are a lot of SKC fans who are actually extremely excited with this news, and you are not. Because last week, after Connor adamantly avoided naming Peter Vermes on the hot seat to avoid being seen as silly, he got made to look silly because Peter Vermes left Sporting KC, which for those of you who are not in the know, that's MLS talk for he was sacked. And it ended the longest reign that any manager had over any MLS team in history. In fact, according to Wikipedia, his 15 years and 239 days in charge ended the tenure that was the third longest in the world at that time. And it ranks 40th all time in, which is a very weird stat because Wikipedia set it up funny. Out of all managers after 1946, because why 1946? Who knows? But he is the 40th longest reigning manager of all time. And after all this time, as both a player and a coach, it's kind of tough to determine what exactly SKC is going to be without him. But it would be silly not to acknowledge that they are who they are because of who he is. So I wanted to kind of talk to you first about his legacy and what legacy he leaves behind Sporting KC.
Listen, I mean, I think if you're there that many years, if you give it enough time, the KC fans might come around and start to see his tenure as being a bit better. But I mean, if you look at the numbers, 15 seasons, and he out of the Supporter Shield and MLS Cup, he won one. I mean, that's 30 opportunities for a major trophy in the league, and you did it once. One out of 30. I mean, I know it's not like easy to win these things, but my goodness. I mean, that's not a great, return. I mean, you could talk about, being consistently good for so many years, but if you're not winning trophies, it's kind of like, how, like, what's your bar for being successful? And I feel like there's a point in time where getting to that consistent level of success is an achievement. But then once you kind of establish that, you got to take the next step and start winning some trophies. And he did win a couple of US Open Cups, which,
Put some
that's not
respect on
nothing.
the U.S. Open Cup, by the
All
way.
right, all
Oh, he
right,
only he
settle
only had
down.
two. He had 30 chances to win title. He had lots more than that.
Well, I listen, I said 30 to win either the Supporter Shield or MLS Cup. Okay? Because those say what you want about the US Open Cup. Those are bigger than the US Open Cup. And I would sure you would not just all right, don't give me
Get
that
him,
look.
comments. Get him.
Yeah, go ahead. Try and argue that one. So yeah, I mean, I think it was long overdue. It was long overdue to move on. I think we know this, considering, I said this last season, and that was probably still a point where it was long overdue. But yeah, also just a big fuck you to Sporting KC, since, I made this whole prediction last year, the entire year, didn't let him go. And then this week, literally last week, when I decided not to say anything about him being on the hot seat to get fired, that was the time they decided to let him go. So I think that is a clear indication that they are listening to the pod, and I clearly have a lot of sway in the SKC boardroom. So, just I'll put my Venmo in the description of this episode. If KC fans want to start sending me some money and some recommendations on who they want to be the next manager, just let me know, and I will talk about it next podcast episode, and we can start get the ball rolling for who's going to be next in line for you guys.
It's so funny because I think we had a comment on YouTube that was like, "You guys have done it again. You worked it into existence by not talking about it." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. We need to start charging for it." So he uh,
We
he
really
he
do.
laughed at it. He was a Casey fan, so he thanked us for our service. But
You're
we
welcome.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, SKC is Peter Vermes as much as Peter Vermes is SKC, right? And you talked about it both as a player and as a coach. What he created, I think, was nothing short of spectacular in terms of that. You don't see that sort of longevity in coaches in American sports usually ever, right? But as an original 10 club, he played 1 year with the Metro, 2 year for Colorado, and then he joined the Wizards. And then outside of a 3 year stint after he retired from playing, he was there forever, right? He joined as a technical director in '06, and then he took over as the interim in '09, and he never left, right? That's almost 20 full years in an organization, which is insane to think about, right? You think about somebody like everybody likes the Arsene Wenger comparison, right? He had 22 years in Arsenal, right? That's crazy. I think that it's tough to compare the before and after Peter Vermes' coaching tenure because of how much the league has changed, right? He joined the league, or when he joined as a player, there were 8 to 10 teams, right? They were up, they were down, they either won conference titles and cup shield doubles and the most impressive MVP for performance of all time in Tony Meola, or he finishes last in the conference and misses the playoffs the next year. Like it was so up and down. Or in 2002, he finished dead last in the conference and still made the playoffs because MLS. But anyways, his time at SKC was not terrible, right? I think an MLS Cup within his first 4 years, multiple top three Western Conference finishes, 8 straight playoff appearances, 3 U.S. Open Cup trophies. Like that is not something to sneeze at. But then it started to take the turn and the consistency was lacking. And we're going to get into that in a little bit here. But I don't think this might be a bold take. Like, I don't think he goes down as like a top three or top five manager in MLS history.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
100% not.
I don't think he's that close. But I do think it's because of his unceremonious ending. Like if he leaves 3 years ago on top, that's you have this conversation. But he was solid. He was good. He was okay. He was face of SKC for a reason.
Yeah, but
Um,
you don't do okay for 15 years, you know?
well, he didn't do okay for 15 years, right? He made the playoffs 8 straight years, right?
Okay,
And then
but you didn't win anything in the
but he
playoffs.
did.
He won
But
one.
he did. He won the U.S. Open Cup 3 different times.
That's not the playoffs.
Don't have to be. If you're winning
Who said the
trophies,
playoffs?
how are you going to let somebody go who's winning you trophies?
I mean, if you were consistently performing poorly in the league and winning a US Open Cup, I think eventually you would get sacked.
Yeah, maybe, but he's making the playoffs. He's winning trophies. He's won titles. He's finished first in his division. Like he has done things to, and we're going to have this argument here in a little bit about was the timing right? Did they should they have done it earlier or later? And we can probably transition to that right now because I think everybody was calling for this to be done 2 years ago, and I think we were as well. But I think he saved his job each year because they gave him his last chance, right? Okay, this is your last chance. You had a bad year, but you're a part of the organization. We appreciate you. We know who you are. This is your last chance. We can't do it. And what does he do? He tops the West, right? He goes in, and I think it was between the 2018, yeah, 2018 and 2021, 22 was like he finished first in 2018, 11th out of 13 in 2019, then first again in 2020, third in 2021, then back to 12th in 2022. You don't get rid of somebody who's giving you those sorts of results because again, he took his last chance and he made the most of it, right? He made the most of his last chance, and you can't fire a manager after he wins you the conference. Now, could you have argued, okay, yeah, he had one bad year, we should have let him go halfway through there? Yeah, but let's look at this like run here from 2010 in the conference: third, first, second, fifth, sixth, fifth, first, 11th. It took him until 2019 before he had his first non-top 10 finish in the conference. And even in the league, he never finished lower than 11th until 2019. Like that's not. I don't think that's a track record. That means he should have been gone back before COVID. Now, can you argue he should have been done 2 years ago? Absolutely. But he did make the most of the last couple chances, in my opinion.
I mean, I could hear the argument for it. I'm not gonna like sit here and be like, "Oh my God, like how could they have kept him for, that whole time period?" I mean, if you look at their list of by season, I mean, it's a lot of yellow in there. That's for sure. Like
Yeah.
you're not gonna kick a guy out that's getting a lot of yellow. I can understand that. I mean, I could definitely see a more ambitious team maybe giving him the sack sometime between 2014 and 2017. I know he won 2 US Open Cups in that time, but league performance was not great. I mean, it looks like they kind of just got into the playoffs all those years and got knocked out in the first round every single time. So, I feel like a team nowadays, like an LAFC type, may not necessarily be okay with results like that. So I think it kind of depends on the team. But I think that's kind of part of the problem that happened with SKC and Vermees was not willing to like make changes. Like when I think of that SKC team, I think of like the same core group of players for the entire time, which I understand. Like you're winning, and definitely during that era, you can get away with keeping those same guys every single year and being successful. And then the league started to change, and you could see that with the turn of like going into the 2020s. And now things are not the same anymore. You can't just keep getting away with throwing the same guys out there every time, especially when at that point they're getting much older and declining, and they just seemed so reluctant to make any changes. I mean, that was consistent even with new people they brought in. I mean, like, how long was Alan Pulido there? And he was just constantly being injured and underperforming his DP role. And then eventually it caught up, and the league started to advance much faster than SKC was keeping up because they wouldn't make changes. And then 2020s rolled around and it really started to show. And he was just not. I mean, he was showing that he wasn't capable of keeping up with the changes and making the necessary moves needed to like keep SKC competitive.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page here. I don't believe that we're sitting here saying that he was out of his mind and a brilliant, top guy that the league needed. But I also think that I can't fault them for finishing top 10 in the league every year since until 2019, right? And then, in my opinion, they gave him that, okay, you have one more shot. He finishes in first. Then the next year he finishes in third, if we're going to go full table. And then he finishes in fourth, right? So again, you're looking at this, okay, he's getting results out of the group that he has. Then you have the injury bug hit him in 2022. He's okay, not great in 2023, makes the playoffs. Then 2024, he's back down at the bottom again. I think it looks on paper like he should have gone in the last couple of years, and I can agree with that. He snuck into the playoffs. Like, it's not a level that is necessarily ambitious. You wouldn't see new teams doing that now. But I do believe that when you are somebody like Peter Vermes, who has been around so long, your leash is longer. You do have that leeway to say, you know what I can get you, you know who I am, and it's very much like Jim Curtin, I believe, should have had a longer leash in uh, Philly, right? He had one bad year, and you knew what he can give you, and they said no. Is it ambitious, or is it, rewarding what you know you have? And that's an argument that we can have for another day if you'd like. But after three straight seasons without a top 15 finish in the league and a very shady start 2025, which included a letter from the largest supporters group in Kansas City calling for his resignation, then they made the right call. I don't disagree that, he should have gone, and I don't think that, he do I think he overstayed his welcome by a year or two? Sure. Do I think he should have gone before COVID? No.
Yeah, I would say I think you've convinced me on that one. I would say I agree with that. I think his time in the 2010s, SKC was pretty like consistently strong. I would say probably outside of that one era, those couple of like 4 years. But even during that time, I think winning those couple of U.S. Open Cups is what kept him in the job there. I think if he doesn't win those cups, he's probably gone in that 4 year window where you're kind of just barely sneaking into the playoffs and then getting knocked out immediately in the first round. But um, I would agree. I would think he was probably on the cusp around then. And then, like you said, had those 2 years in 2018 and 2020 where they finished high up in the West. Well, they finished top of the West and high up in the Supporter Shield, and that probably kept him around for at least that extra couple of years. But yeah, no, they should have let him go earlier on, probably in 2022. I understand there were injuries and all that stuff, and that's maybe why they gave him a little bit more time. But
Right.
I think, and this is something for ownership. It's not necessarily something for coaches, but I think they have to figure out when's the right time to kind of move on and change things up. And it's a hard thing to do. And clearly, like there's teams that make mistakes with it. Like, Chicago does it with players often. It's clear that SKC is doing it with players and coaches. Um, and it's funny, you mentioned Wenger. You did that comparison as you mentioned it. I was literally pulling him up because I was like, that's a good comparison of like someone who, at least according to a lot of like fans and all that, felt like kind of overstayed their welcome. But I feel like Wenger's a completely different story because he won so much for that team. Like he was insanely successful for them. And I think Vermees was successful for SKC too, but not nearly to the level of Wenger. So
Yes, I want to make it clear. I'm not comparing Peter
no,
Vermes
no,
with
no, of
the
course. I,
Arsene
I didn't think
Wenger
you
and Red
were
Lost.
either.
Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
is not. He was never at that level. However, I was just using that as a longevity comparison for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the For me again, it's less about. I think that he got a longer leash than he should have, but I believe it was earned. Is kind of where I'm trying to go with this. Is should he have been gone 2 years ago? Yes, but he earned having that longer leash. He's shown what he can do. He had a couple of things pop up, and unlike in Philly, the front office of SKC was understanding enough to say, okay, I'm going to give you one more shot. And when he got that one more shot, he provided for it, right? And then in the last 2 years, it didn't quite come to fruition. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. But I do want to ask because at the end of the day, he's gone. There's no amount of podcasting that we can do to bring him back, at least to SKC. Montreal is a different story. Um, but what's next, right? What is SKC without Vermes? What do they need?
I mean, I think the team itself needs to rebuild. I mean, it's just me personally. I don't think that the team is exactly in great shape. Like this isn't an LAFC team that's being held back by a coach. I mean, I think they need to change things up. They need to finally kind of just settle in and make the decision that they're going to like I think this should be the Kickstarter for it. Like now's your chance to kind of like fully dive into a full rebuild of the coach, the players, because there's just too much continuity on this team for the results that they've been getting in the last few years. You know, I think it's time to kind of I think they did a bit of that over the last couple of years. I think they started to finally kind of move on from the old guard and bring in some new people, but I still think there's plenty more room to go in that regard. Um, so I think it's just like you take this year, you start to kind of clear out the bad contracts, and you look to start rebuilding. Maybe a little bit in the summer, but I think the big rebuild comes in the winter of next year. But I don't, me personally, I don't think the roster's in the shape where you can bring in another manager and still push to get something out of this season. I feel like you kind of just have to maybe just take this season on the chin and just try to rebuild for the next one and come back in better shape.
So let me push you on that a little bit more because I am looking more for what's next in terms of a coach. So let's assume that they get their roster up to wherever they need it to be. What are they looking for in the next coach? Are they looking for somebody who's a bit more flexible with the way that he plays? They're looking for somebody who, what do they need to look for is kind of what I'm going for here. Because yeah, the roster is what it is, right? And you can easily point to that as something that is the precipice of why he wasn't succeeding. Granted, I believe he had a really big hand in making that roster, considering his double role. And I'm actually interested. I don't actually know if I read this, if he got let go of both roles or if he's still within the club. I need to double check that. But anyways, what are we looking for here?
I it's hard to say because they haven't been in a coach search in 15 or 16 years, so it's there's not exactly like a track record to base it off of here to be like, oh, this, like this is typically what they've looked for in a coach. Obviously, there's plenty of really good coaches that are available. I think majority of them are not going to come to the U.S. to play for SKC, or sorry, to coach for SKC. But I feel like they're going to go and kind of play it safe and go with someone who's got experience in the league. A similar move to like what Toronto did, bringing in Robin Fraser. I'd have to look into the names to think of somebody who would kind of fit that bill. But SKC just doesn't strike me as a team that's very like adventurous and risky and is going to just kind of like throw out, bring in like a Nuri Shaheen. I probably butchered that name so bad, but you know who
No,
I'm
that was
talking
good.
about, the one from
Yeah, yeah,
Dortmund,
from
right?
Dortmund.
Like a young
Another
manager
club
who's kind of,
legend.
huh?
Another club legend.
Yeah,
Somebody,
another club.
somebody, somebody call Matt Beasler up.
I honestly, I could see, I can. That might be a possibility. I know you
Isn't that
joke about
funny?
that, but
You see Graham Zusi and Roger Espinoza running the touchline.
yeah, Tim Mealy is the goalkeeper coach. Just run it back. Honestly, no, that's a good mention. I mean, that could be possible. I still think they go with the experience hire, but if they did that, I wouldn't be shocked.
Here's what I'll tell you. Also, I'm just looking up really quick. Matt Beasler is a club director for Captain Soccer Club, a new youth soccer club based in Kansas City. So I don't know if he has his coaching licenses, which you
I
need
should
to
pay the fine.
be in there. Yeah, right. But that'd be funny. Um, Listen, you were absolutely right. They have not gone through a search in 16 years, and it's not something they used to do continually, right? I believe that they have had four permanent managers in their time in MLS, which is what the amount that Chelsea usually go through in a season, give or take, something like that.
Was that
Um,
necessary?
it
Was it? Was
absolutely
it?
was. You know for sure it was necessary. Here's the length of time that those managers have lasted. Their shortest, 845 days, almost 1,200 days the next shortest, over 2,600 days the next one, and then Peter Vermes at 500 or 5,620 days. Right? This isn't a team that's going to be like, oh, let's just bring in whoever we want and then let them jump ship. Like they want somebody who's going to be there, build culture, and continue to grow this club. So you know where I'm going. Who
Oh
else?
no,
Who else has had a ton of time at a club building culture and building a lot out of nothing to get them back to the powerhouse? Yeah, if
no,
CF Montreal isn't going to do it, Jim Curtin's phone better be ringing
no,
off the hook
no,
for Sporting
no,
Kansas City. He lasted
no.
4,000 days of Philly in two managerless clubs. He's the much better fit in KC. They're going to give him money. They've got a better infrastructure. They've got a better youth pipeline. Everything is much better there than it would be in Montreal. And I can see him if he wants to take the job, they'll give it to him for a long time. That being said, I don't think that it's actually going to happen, but I do. That's the sort of mold that I'm looking for. Somebody who's going to be there a long time, go through the highs and lows, get them immediate success, and hold them there. But I don't think, like you mentioned, I don't think it's going to be some big name hotshot from Europe who's going to use SKC as again, I use Eric Ramsey again as this thing like oh, I'm a young upstart out of Man United. I'm going to apply for it, and then after I play for, after I do well in 3, 4 seasons, I'm going to jump ship back to Europe. I don't think that's the thing. I think they're going to stay local, and they're going to go from there.
You know who I could see as a shout here?
Jim Curtin.
No, absolutely not. Bob Bradley.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
He's available right now.
He is.
Obviously, extremely experienced in the league, very successful in the league as well. And I feel like just fits the SKC mold very well. Of like, I just feel like he could get a good amount out of an SKC type team.
I like that. That might be the greatest thing you have actually added to this podcast ever.
Ever?
So,
Is the
ever.
bar that low?
Oh, let's be real here. You know the bar's that low.
Are we deadlifting? Is the bar that low?
Nice. No, listen, I think it's a really good shot. I'd love to see him come back here. Again, there are clubs in MLS that you don't want to see do the whole manager recycle thing, right? And we talk about that a lot, whether it's good or bad. SKC absolutely feels like one of those teams that needs to have somebody who knows what this league's about so they can come in, get success early, and build off of it. So I like that
Yeah.
shout. I
I
think I'd take Jim Curtin over Bob Bradley though, personally.
well, I could say like in terms of the recycle, those are two guys that kind of are an exception to that rule. You know,
Fair, totally fair.
you recycle Bob Bradley and Jim Curtin as much as you want. Like those guys have earned the right to be recycled. You don't recycle a guy like Neville or quite frankly, no offense, but Robin Fraser either.
Man,
Not with the
maybe
track records.
maybe we need to give you time off more frequently because these are some great shouts that you're giving. Josh Wolf is
Yeah, I've been
around.
studying. I've been
Yeah, you
studying.
have. You took 2.5 months off just so you could study who's going to come in and
I mean,
replace Peter
nobody said
Vermes.
it. Everybody was like, "Oh, where's Connor?" Nobody ever said the library, studying up, hitting the books. No, instead I was begging on the streets, right, Eli? Don't think I don't remember.
It's hilarious. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, there aren't a ton of American managers that have been in here. You got Jim Curtin, Josh Wolf, Hackenworth, who was just at St. Louis, Valentino, who I think is a little bit outside the expectation right now. Mike Peckey's still available. King Mike, please come back and coach. I need more of your hot takes. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. You got Bob Bradley, who you mentioned, and that's pretty much it. A couple of USL managers that could do a job, but um, no, I really like that shout. That's really solid. But we need to move on because we could sit here and pander over it, but we all know at the end of the day, it's not gonna be us who decides, right? So